Hi everyone, welcome to CS 61A CSM Week 9 problem number 1 for object-oriented programming. We have here a what would Python do problem, but before we look at each line of code, let's first take a look at the classes and visualize what is going on. So we see that there is a Jedi class and a Sith class, and these are both the child classes of the parent class Force Builder based on how these lines are written. And another way to say that is Jedi and Sith are both the subclasses of Force Builder, which is the super class. So recall that the child classes inherit all of the attributes from the parent class unless the child class overrides these attributes. So let's write Jedi. And the first thing we have to notice is that this Jedi class has a class attribute called lightsaber, which is set to blue. That means that this class attribute is shared amongst all instances of the class Jedi. So every instance of Jedi is going to have a lightsaber attribute that is set equal to blue. So let's specify that there is a lightsaber attribute in Jedi that is now set to blue. Okay. Then we go up in the parent class and we see that the parent class also has a class attribute called Force, which is equal to 25. So that is going to be inherited by Jedi, and Force is now going to be equal to 25. So when we take a look at this first line of code here, it says Anakin is equal to Jedi Anakin. What this is doing is we are creating a new instance of the class Jedi. And when we construct a new instance, we look at the constructor, and the constructor is specifically the init method inside of that class. So we go to Jedi and we look for the init method. We don't see an init method, however, so we go up to its parent class and we see that there is indeed an init method here. So what is this init method doing? It takes in one argument, which is name, and it sets this argument to the instances attribute called name. And we know that because this self tells us that that is the current instance that we are currently looking at. And what we are currently looking at is the Anakin instance. So the name attribute of this Anakin instance is going to be equal to Anakin. So Anakin, which is the variable that points to this object in Jedi, the name is set equal to Anakin. Okay, next we want to return Anakin.lightsaber and Anakin.force. Since Anakin is an instance of Jedi, the class attribute is going to be shared amongst all of its instances. So these two class attributes are going to be shared in Anakin as well. So Anakin's lightsaber is blue, and the force is 25. Okay, next line, we have Obi-Wan is equal to Jedi Obi-Wan. Same thing here. We are creating a new instance of Jedi and setting its attribute name equal to Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan, the variable Obi-Wan, is an instance with the attribute name that is Obi-Wan. Okay, next we are setting Anakin.master is equal to Obi-Wan. What is this doing here? So when we do Anakin.master, we are essentially just creating a new instance attribute for this specific instance Anakin. So this master is going to go under the Anakin instance, and it's going to point to the instance Obi-Wan because the instance is an object. So when we return Anakin.master, we want to represent this. We want to see how this is represented by going to the repr method of that class. So Obi-Wan is an instance of Jedi, so we look for the repr method of the Jedi class. This repr method tells you to return Jedi, then in parentheses, the repr of self.name. So when we are returning Anakin.master, that is going to look something like this. Okay. Next, we have Jedi.master. Jedi is a class. It is not an attribute. It is not an instance. And remember, master was a specific attribute for the specific instance Anakin. So the class Jedi does not have access to this instance attribute. So this is actually going to error, and it's specifically an attribute error. All right, next we have Obi-Wan.force is plus equal to Anakin.force. So Obi-Wan, again, is an instance of Jedi. So it also shares these class attributes. So both Anakin and Obi-Wan's force is equal to 25 currently. But we want to add the value of Anakin.force, which is equal to 25, to Obi-Wan. And we want to change Obi-Wan's force. So instead of 25, it's now going to become 50. And now we return Obi-Wan.force, Anakin.force. That is going to give us 50 and 25. Okay, next we want to actually call a method this time. So Obi-Wan.train, and as the argument is the instance Anakin. So since again, Obi-Wan is an instance of the class Jedi, we first want to look in that specific class and see if there is the function, well, if there's the method train. And we see that there is no train method. So we go up to its parent class and look for the train method, which is right here. And we see that it takes in one argument, which is other. In this case, other is equal to Anakin. So this method right here is basically saying Anakin.force plus equal to self.force. In this case, remember, self is the current instance that called that method. So in this case, because we were using dot notation on the instance Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan is self. So Obi-Wan dot force divided by 5. So what's Obi-Wan dot force divided by 5? Obi-Wan dot force is 50, and we divide that by 5, which is 10. And we add 10 to Anakin dot force. So Anakin dot force is currently 25. We want to turn that to 35. Okay, so now we return these two values. Obi-Wan's force has not changed, and Anakin's force has been added to 10. Okay. Next, we have this line, and this line right here and this line right here are actually the same exact thing. That is because when we are using the dot expression on a specific instance, this self argument, when we do it with an instance, this self is implicitly referenced. So the method knows that we use this instance specifically as the self argument. But when we use the dot expression on a class, in this case Jedi, we have to specify what this self instance is. So in this case, self is equal to Obi-Wan, and Anakin is equal to other. So it is doing the exact same thing as the previous line of code, where we added 10 to Anakin.force. So same thing is going to happen where Obi-Wan's force is 50 and Anakin's force is 45. Okay, now we're finally looking at this class here. And in this case, before we do the instances, let's first denote Sith class and look at its class attributes. So lightsaber this time is equal to red. Num-Sith is equal to 0. And remember, we want to look at the parent class force fielder, and look at the class attribute there. So force is also equal to 25. Okay, now we are creating a new instance of this Sith class, which is set equal to the variable Sidious. So Sidious, and again, when we create a new instance, we call the init method of that class. So init method is right here. And when we create this constructor, when we call this constructor, we do all of the things that is inside of this init method. So first we do this, and this basically tells you to go to the init method of the parent class and do whatever is inside there as the first line of code. So it just tells you to set the name attribute of this Sidious instance equal to Sidious. Then we want to add 1 to the num_sith attribute of our class Sith. So we look at Sith, and then we look at num_sith, and we want to add 1 to it. So this now becomes 1. Then this line says if self.num_sith. So again, self is our current attribute. Our current instance. Our current instance is the Sidious instance. So if Sidious attribute of num_sith is not equal to 2, in this case, self.num_sith and sith.num_sith are both the same thing because num_sith is a class attribute that is shared by all instances of that class. So we look at here and we see that num_sith is not equal to 2. So we want to print this. So when we are just setting Sidious equal to this constructor, this is actually going to get printed. All right. And one thing to recall is that when we print something, we never print out the quotation marks, but when we return something, we do return the quotation marks. Okay, so forcefielder.train. Forcefielder is a class. So forcefielder.train is this method. And remember again that because we used the class name in the dot expression, we have to specify what the self instance and whatever this is. So self in this case will be equal to Sidious. So let's change that to Sidious. And other in this case is still equal to Anakin. So we are adding Sidious.force divided by 5 to Anakin.force. So what is Sidious.force? Again, since this is a class variable, we are sharing it to Sidious. And force divided by 5 is equal to 5. So we are adding 5 to Anakin.force. Anakin.force is currently, oh, sorry, I forgot to change this earlier, but it should have been 45, as you can see on this line here. But yeah, so Anakin's force was 45, and we want to add 5 to it, so it should now be 50. And then we set Anakin.lightsaber is equal to red. So lightsaber of Anakin is now red instead of blue. And when we return, okay, then we do Jedi.lightsaber. So Jedi.lightsaber is still blue. Now this part is a bit tricky. What we do here is we first do this, then we do this, then we do this entire thing. So here, instead of setting a new instance equal to a variable like we did in the past, we are directly creating new instances inside of this print method. So Sith Vader, since it is not set equal to a specific variable, I'll just create boxes. So Sith Vader, again, since we are creating a new instance, we look at the init method, and the init method tells you to set the name equal to Vader. All right. Next, we sith.num_sith plus equals 1. So sith.num_sith is used to be 1. Now we are changing it to 2. Now we go to the next line. It says if self.numsith is not equal to 2, we just changed it to 2. So it is indeed equal to 2, so we don't do anything. So this line right here, this Sith Vader, this does not print out anything. Then we do this line. So Sith, first we create a new instance. So okay, then we do the same thing where we add 1 to our numsith. So our numsith is now 3. Then if it's not 2, so it's not 2 anymore, so we print this out. So we actually print, and I'm not going to write this entire thing, but you should always write out the entire thing, but I'm not going to write it just for time constraints. Then yeah, so then we find the value of .numsith, which is equal to, okay, sorry. So yeah, it's equal to 3. So now we want to print these values. We want to print Sith Vader, and we want to print this thing that we just evaluated. So first thing we want to print is Sith Vader. When we are printing an instance, then we want to refer to the string method. So the str method and this says to return Darth space, then the self name. So in this case, the name of our method, of our instance here was Vader. So what we want to print out is self is Darth and then Vader. Then we want to print out 3 because this time we aren't printing out the actual instance, but we want an attribute of this instance, which is numsith. Numsith of this instance is 3. Okay. Next, we have Rey is equal to force wielder Rey. Again, we are creating a new instance, this time of the superclass force wielder. So we have Rey, and remember that our init function wanted us to just set that to Rey. So now we return Rey. The reason why these two are different is because this refers to the str method inside of the class because we want to print it. However, when we are just returning it like without anything before, like not print Rey, just want to return Rey like this, then we refer to the repr, which is why those two are different. So notice here that this force wielder class does not have a repr function. So it's going to default to this if there is no repr function. Okay, finally, we have Rey.lightsaber. We look for lightsaber class attribute or any attribute really, and we find no lightsaber attributes inside of this superclass. There is a lightsaber attribute in these subclasses, but for inheritance, you can only inherit from the superclass, and the superclass cannot go down and access and inherit stuff from its child class. So the hierarchy only works where the stuff from above can be inherited from the stuff below. So Rey.lightsaber is not a thing because Rey is an instance of force wielder, which is the superclass, and that does not have the lightsaber attribute. So in this case, it's going to give you an attribute error because Rey does not have the attribute lightsaber.